Welcome to the office. In this video, I'm going to review the object and the process made in the last 3 videos and talk a little bit about my strategy and what worked well and what didn't work well. So first off, just the strategy of what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. In the early stages of making these patterns, I'm not quite sure exactly how they're all going to come out. And sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised by how they come out. But what I'm doing now, I'm kind of building a library of known shapes, known techniques, and trying different things using the squeezer, using the NQALHA, using a combination of hot and cold assembly, so that I kind of get a spectrum where I can look at it and go, oh, this worked well, oh, this worked really well, oh, that didn't come out as good as I thought. And then as I proceed further, I'll be able to more precisely direct what it is that I'm doing. And of course, that being said, sometimes it's kind of fun when I am surprised. Sometimes it is kind of fun to just let the glass do what the glass is going to do. And more often than not, it's a really pleasant and fun surprise. So just to start the review process, I didn't make videos of constructing the elements, but the elements are constructed using techniques that I showed in a number of my previous videos, striping on the NQALHA, squeezing on the squeezer, so a little bit of hot assembly, a little bit of hot assembly on the NQALHA, which it turns out to be an excellent tool for hot assembly with the piece being held in positioning mode and using the hand torch to apply the piece. So as you can see in the still photograph here, when I put the pieces together, they didn't really all line up perfectly. I mean, I try as hard as I can to pull them to a uniform size and good straightness, but they're not straight, they're not round, they're not perfect. And as a result, and of course round things, even if they were perfect, there's always going to be a few little holes in between the round guys. And so the assembly, the cold assembly, wasn't perfect. And of course that leads to the challenge of trying to get all the air out. And to a certain extent it's impossible. I've thought a little bit about, well, is there any way to rig up a geometry or a construction where vacuum could be applied? And as far as I can imagine right now, I can't figure out a way to do that. So what I just try to do is kind of gently heat and squeeze and hopefully squeeze out most of the air. And the result of this project was, yes, it was mostly successful. Almost all of the air was squeezed out. The remaining air bubbles were small and few. Of course, the air bubbles that I'm seeing are not all a result of the cold assembly and gaps trapping air. Some of the air bubbles were introduced when the original sub-assemblies were made because the glass was overheated and it boiled and it led to some bubbles. And so that's definitely an area for improvement, to be continually careful and on the lookout for overheating glass while assembly. And of course, I've been saying this since the beginning. It's easier to say it than it is to actually do it. So the construction went very well. The cold assembly method is a useful method, but before everything is tagged together, the piece is very unstable, and my early pieces just cracked and exploded and fell off the punty and were unrecoverable. But I think I'm developing the technique to a point now where they almost always succeed. So that's good news. Pulling is still a challenge. I'm still working on getting the pull uniform and trying to perfect it as much as I can. But as I said in the video, even the expert pullers that I've seen, they always get a little bit of a knuckle on the end. I've never seen anybody get a 100% uniform pull with absolutely zero knuckle and just totally almost machine-made perfection. Haven't seen that yet, but it's the impossible goal that I'm shooting toward. Of course, other than just a personal challenge, there's no real practical necessity to make the pull perfect when the pull is followed by the resize operation, because the resize operation produces very, very good results with minimum distortion and puts the chunks into a very nearly perfect shape. I mean, it's hard to imagine how glass could be hot formed any better than the way the resizing operation does it. So I'm very happy with that. And then once the blocks are cut into chips, the chips fit together very, very well with no cold working at all, with almost no gaps that need to be filled where the chips meet, which of course is a good thing, because the more gap filling you need to do, the more heat you need to apply, the more squeezing you need to do, the more chance for distortion you have. So the fit worked extremely well. I'm very, very happy with that. The rig, the chip stack assembly rig with the little baby kiln is performing exceptionally well. The only criticism that I can direct at it is that the little Paragon caldera is kind of underpowered, and it would be nice if it recovered temperature a little bit faster. Of course, I can always imagine, well, is there any way I could ever make a kind of a gas-fired glory hole, Boro glory hole at much higher temperature? Would that be useful? Would that be necessary? Would it even be possible? Could an electric kiln be constructed or contracted, or in some other way modify an existing kiln or something? Anyway, that research is still ongoing, and that's what makes this fun. It's all an R&D project. The substrate that I'm using, the 99% alumina from McMaster Carr, seems to be holding up really well. I have noticed a tiny, tiny bit of minor surface cracking, usually because that's where the torch hits the ceramic directly, and it kind of doesn't like that. Although the plate still, the structural integrity is fine. It hasn't broken apart into pieces. And overall, it seems to be a fairly reasonable material. I am investigating some options. I'm looking into solid boron nitride. I'm looking into, I have a couple of pieces actually of far less expensive 99% alumina from China, from eBay, that will be tested soon. I've also got a bottle of some substance that claims to reduce oxidation when applied to graphite. So I'm going to kind of paint the graphite with this and see if I can use the graphite as a substrate. But when I tried using graphite as a substrate before, well, once it gets red hot, you can actually see it burning, and it wouldn't last very long, and it produces this kind of really ugly black ash that gets all over the glass. So anyway, the search for a substrate is still continuing. One of the crazy ideas that I had, I'm looking into, well, do people do borosilicate glass casting, and if so, how? And so far the research that I've seen is that it's all a kind of a variation of the lost wax process for metal casting, where you basically make a ceramic mold that's destroyed when the part is removed. And I'm wondering, maybe I'll just try. I actually ordered some of the ceramic casting compound. Maybe I'll try making a ceramic mold, put my chips in, put it in the kiln, heat it up to like 2300 degrees, and see if the chips actually flow together in a nice way that looks good and doesn't just like totally destroy or degrade or in some other way make the chips fail, and then just chip off the ceramic when it's done. The molds would be a one-time use situation. So anyway, research will continue. I think this is a very interesting path to be on, a very interesting thing to be developing. And once again, anybody out there in YouTube land who has already mastered this and kind of wants to share some of your experience, please help me out. Another thing that worked really well, the Mirage hand torch works really well, and the little mini torch with the 7-hole aftermarket tip works really well. I'm still developing my technique to effectively use the torch to concentrate the heat strong enough to melt pieces together, but not too strong so that it actually boils and bubbles the glass. I was able to remove pretty much all of the larger voids, the larger air pockets in the chips. I was able to successfully get rid of almost all of them. A couple of them did remain because they're really hard to see when the glass is hot. And it may be, I use prescription glassworking glasses, it may be that I just didn't have them in focus, and maybe if I switched to a different diopter of prescription glasses, or maybe had some different lighting or some other strategy to be able to more clearly see how the surface looked, because when I was working with it hot, it looked really good. And then when I took it out after it annealed, when I took it out to cold work it, I noticed, oh, it's got a divot in the middle. Oh, it's got some more bubbles I didn't catch. Oh, looks like I'm gonna have to do some more grinding. And speaking of divot, I need to be really careful when attaching the punty, even though I was thinking about don't press too hard, don't distort the surface when you press the punty in. I probably made the surface a tiny bit too hot and put the punty on with a tiny amount, with slightly too much pressure. And even though I was thinking about don't press too hard, don't get the surface too hot, I probably got the surface too hot and pressed too hard. And as a result, when I was cold working, there was a bit of a divot where the punty was attached, and that required a substantial amount of cold working, grinding it away. But since I start with an almost 1/4 inch thick piece, even if I have to do aggressive cold working, I still end up with a nice thickness of the final piece. So overall, I judge the work to be a success. I judge the process to be a success, and I see a lot of interesting adventure in the future. Also, the question of, well, what am I going to do with these chips now that they're made? Some of them will go into sculptures, glass, wood, metal sculptures, and then others I'm working with glass workers to do collaborations, so the glass workers can take my chips and put them on their pieces. And so far, that had the very few that have been done have come out really beautiful. The glass workers have done a very, or actually the glass worker, I've only got one guy working with me so far, Sir Pyro, has done an absolutely amazing, beautiful job with the work that he did. So anyway, that is the final word on this piece, and more pieces coming soon. Thank you for watching. It's been fun.